Hey guys, uh, welcome this morning. We're going to talk about the 3Ds and how to fight back and get paid when you talk about getting these jobs. We talk about doing jobs a lot, we talk about production a lot, but one of the things we don't talk about a lot is how to get paid on those. So it's a few things that you've got to follow in order to get paid on a job. A lot of us say that we're in business to go out and dry buildings. We're in business to do commercial work. We're in business to clean carpets. We're in business for this and not, but we're not really. We're in business to make money. And if we don't make money, no matter what your reason for doing it is, chances are you won't be in business for very long. So let's talk about how to get this work done. We've talked about before how to get this work done. So today let's talk about how to get paid for the work that we get done. It's a book that I think everyone in this industry needs to read. It's called Delay, Deny, and Defend, and it's by Jay Finnenman. It's one of the better books I've read. I don't read a lot, don't get involved a lot in reading, but it's one of the better books I've read. It's a short read, and Jay has written a book about the insurance industry and how they characteristically have put together a program to delay claims and to deny claims and how to defend claims. So we want to talk about that a little bit. And there's a couple of sections of the book that you might not want to read. It has to do with automobile claims and some other things. So it's a little bit you can skip over, but it's good reading in all of it. But it lets you understand where the psyche of the insurance companies are, not necessarily the individual adjusters, but the insurance companies are, and where their overall training mindset is when they're training adjusters, when they're training senior adjusters, and where their overall mindset is on getting people trained. Why do insurance companies use tactics? Well, it's all about profit. Insurance companies are in business for one thing, and that's to make a profit. So, you know, the first tactic they use is to delay claims. The more they can delay a claim, the more things will go away. People are less emotional when a claim gets delayed. People don't think about it as much. And if they can delay a claim, a lot of times it'll just go away. They wear people out. Uh, the next thing they do is deny the claim. So they deny a claim based on you didn't really have hail damage, or they deny a claim based on your maintenance was poor and you didn't maintain your pipes very well, so we're going to deny the claim. Then once they get to the end of that and they can't deny it anymore, they defend the claim. And in other words, they get legal representation and they start defending the claim and try to make it to be as short as they can possibly make it. What does this look like to your client? Uh, Clients are confused. You do this 100 or 200 times a year. Your client likely is only doing this for their first time, maybe their second time. Uh, but adjusters are trying to make you look at them as a nice guy, the good guy, and that they're working hard to settle your claim. At least that's what they want the client to see. Now, they have a little different attitude when it comes to dealing with the contractor because you're the big bad wolf that's going to huff and puff and blow their house down. Uh, that being said, one of the tactics that you need to use when you're dealing with adjusters is always include the policyholder in the conversation. Get on the phone, set up a conference call. Uh, in your emails, you always email the policyholder, not the adjuster. If the adjuster asks you a question, you still get your email or your phone conversation back with the policyholder, so the policyholder's involved, and you'll find out your adjusters are a lot nicer. Adjusters, it says here, often hire a third party, but on large loss, they always hire a third party consultant to be their go-to guy, their fighter, their fix-it man. And they create a lot of delays in the job, a lot of excuses about this, that, and the other. You first think that's a bad thing, but then as you get into looking at it, that actually can be very profitable for you. So let's talk about how to make that profitable a little bit. But at the same time, let's talk about it, what this third party consultant, fixer man type person should be. Your first warning sign about these so-called consultants they use, and there's several names you could throw out there. There's a lot of consultants that are good, a lot that are bad, but J.S. Held, Meridian, Madison Kepler, don't want to offend anybody by not calling their name, but a lot of consultants out there. But the first question I always ask a consultant or their firm at some point is, hey, can I hire you to come consult for me on a job and represent me as a contractor? And they will say no. They only represent the insurance company. They only want to be on that side of the game. And that tells you a little bit about where they're pointing at there. One of the larger ones in the world is J.S. Held. And they obviously compare notes, because when they get a contractor on one thing, they will share that information and try to roll that down into other things. A lot of times they want to use Xactimate. Unless you're charging fair movers for 8 days, then they don't want to use Xactimate. They want to use a weekly rate from Sunbelt or United on your equipment, because Sunbelt United does a weekly rate, but Xactimate don't do a weekly rate. Or then they may want to use a different price if it's company-owned equipment versus equipment that's not company-owned. Then they might not want to pay supervision, because that's part of your overhead and profit. But then they don't want to pay overhead and profits on a mitigation claim. So they dance all over the place, but they cherry pick what they're looking for and what they're going to a lot of the times in order to make the claim cheaper. In my opinion, to make a long story short, we know, well, it's not an opinion, it's a fact, they get paid by the hour. They don't, as many people have a false sense of thought process that they get paid by the money they save on a claim, or they get paid a percentage of the claim. Most of that is not true, although they do have a scale of guideline that if a claim is from zero to a certain dollar, that it's generally thought to say they can spend so many hours on that claim. If the claim runs larger than that, it's generally thought that they can spend a larger amount on the claim. So they do have a sense of guidelines on the amount of hours they can spend on a claim, but not really a dollar amount per se. So don't fall in the trap of thinking that they're doing that, but they do get paid by the hour. Now, if you send them the perfect estimate, let's not call it estimate, let's call it an invoice, because you never send an estimate for work already completed. If you're billing mitigation, you've already done the work, you're sending an invoice. If you're doing an estimate on the repair of the building and trying to get an agreed scope with the building owner and all concerned and working out the scope and the price, that's an estimate. So don't get the two confused. You'd never give an estimate for work already completed, that's an invoice. So let's say you send the perfect invoice to one of these third-party hired gun consultants. And the third-party hired gun consultant reviews your invoice, and it takes him 20 minutes to review your invoice. And your invoice is, let's just say, $75,000. Number one, if he can't review that in 20 minutes, he's got issues already, because it's pretty easy to review an invoice for that if you're a professional and used to doing it in 20 minutes. But let's say he reviews it in 20 minutes and he stamps right across the top of it, looks great, pay this claim. This guy just made $100. not very much money. But let's say that same consultant can come in and look at your $75,000 claim, and he can argue with you about it for 3 weeks. And you're going to exchange emails back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And he's going to be building time. Every time he opens that file, they bill like a lawyer on point 20 minutes or point 15 or whatever their company quote unquote policy is how they're going to wind up billing the insurance company for their time. So if they can't argue with you about the claim, they can't make a lot of money on the claim. So a lot of times you've got to realize that that's what you're looking at. They look at a 20-minute span of time like you look at putting an extra air mover on a job. They're looking to get paid on their time, and at the end of the day, what they'll admit it or not, they're looking at justifying the amount of time and money that they charge to the insurance carrier, and they want to relate that back to their savings to the insurance company or carrier. Now, they may tell you that that's not the case, but it's inconceivable to believe different, that they don't do that. So you want to be mindful of that. I would challenge all of you to go play croquet or badminton or some game that you have no idea what the rules are. And if you were in a tournament to win a whole bunch of money in this game and you didn't know any of the rules, I think we can all agree it'd be impossible for you to win that game. Well, I want you to relate this back to this insurance, third-party insurance adjuster, insurance carrier, building owner game that you're playing. If you don't know the rules of the game, it's going to be hard for you to win that game. So learn the rules of the game, know where the opponent's coming from, know the opponent's habits, and then once you do that, you can begin to win the game. I encourage each of you to make a folder on each insurance company and then a subfolder on each adjuster and then another subfolder on each consultant. So when you get the same consultant a year and a half from now, or the same consulting company or the same insurance company or adjuster, that you can open that file and you can learn their habits. You can see what they're doing, you can see how they done it, and you'll know their hot buttons and what to try to avoid if you want to avoid them, or how to prepare for it if you're not going to avoid them. So your communications with the adjuster and their third-party consultants, what do they look like? Your emails need to be professional. There are about 25 to 30% of people in this world that will just go crazy if you misspell a word, or if you put to in there instead of to in there, if you put there in there instead of there in there. You know, all these words that have the same meanings, and spell check don't check that. And a certain amount of people just go crazy over that. I sent one of our contracts out to rental contracts out to a client not long ago, and it come back and looked like a third grade teacher had corrected all the typos on it. And it was sort of kind of embarrassing that it happened, but some people just go crazy over that. So be careful when you're writing communications that they're correct. I would say avoid field notes. Your field notes are for your personal use. You bring your field notes back from your guys out in the field, your technicians in the field. You put those together, have somebody with a double, triple major masters in English and literature, and have them put that together in the correct pronunciation. The point is, you want your communications to look really good when you send communications in. Don't write a hasty email in the middle of the night and forget to even hit spell check before you send it off. So make it look good. You'll look a lot more professional. You've got a lot of things when you're trying to get paid that you've got to keep in line as a contractor. You've got timelines, you've got subcontractor schedules, you've got payments, you've got customers' emotions, you got how you're going to deal with the insurance company, you got contracts. And trust me, those are not in the correct order. But you've got all that stuff to deal with, and it's dumped on your plate all at once. As opposed to a normal, regular general contractor, uh, you'll get a call one day and say, hey, you've got an invitation to bid on building this building over here, and we're going to build a new school. And we're going to have a bid opening on such and such day. You can come by and get the blueprints. You can study it. You can get the site maps, and you study all this stuff for months in advance. You get with your subcontractors and you make schedules. You put together timelines. You get your customers' expectations, and you get a good contract put together. And if you win the bid, then you set a start date, you start ordering materials, you start getting all that done. As a mitigation contractor, you're not afforded that luxury. You get a phone call in the middle of the day or the middle of the night when you're least expecting it. You're expecting somebody to be calling you about your extended warranty on your vehicle, and all of a sudden it's somebody with a water damage for 40 or 50 rooms of a hotel. And so now you're rushing out the door and you're dealing with the timelines, the schedules, the customer's emotions, and how to get paid, and your contract all within a few minutes, and they're just hollering, suck water, we got a full house tomorrow night. So you've got to learn how to deal with that a little different when you're in an emergency service business. What's the first step in fighting back and when it comes to getting paid? And guys, you need to prepare every file, not the ones that start out good, but you need to prepare every file as if it's going to be a fight, if it's going to end up in court. Because when you prepare the file that way, you'll never have a fight, and you'll never have to go to court. Everything will be fine because your paperwork is so good. And the lawyers, it's not my terminology, excuse the French, but the lawyers call it the oh shit syndrome. And that's to say, when they open a file and it is so perfect that they just say, oh shit, we can't fight this. And that's what you want from the other side, would it be the consultant or the adjuster or their attorneys. You want them to open that file and say, oh shit, we can't fight this. This file is perfect. So start that from the beginning. So I want you to think about the CDC. Everybody has heard of the CDC, the Center for Disease Control. Well, the biggest disease your business can have is a disease of not collecting your money. You've spent the money, you've done the job, you've created a quality product, everybody's happy with the work, except the insurance company don't want to pay for it, or the consultant don't want to pay for it, or the business owner don't want to pay for it. So that disease will cripple your business and will end your business if you don't control that. So we want to think about the CDC. The first C in that I want you to think about is not center, but it's contract. Who signs your contract? Why does this matter? Well, let's say you show up at 12 o'clock at night and the janitor signs the contract. Now, is he authorized to sign a contract that you're going to send him a bill for $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 on, maybe even a large job, in the hundreds of thousands of jobs? Is he authorized to sign that? Well, maybe he is and maybe he's not. But he's certainly the only person there at 12:30 at night and water's flowing everywhere, so you're going to get that signed. But then you may want to back up and look at the next morning of advancing that contract to someone a little further up the chain of command, if you will, to make sure that everybody's in agreement. Because at the end of the day, after the job's complete and everybody's happy, except it's time to write the check, they'll say, well, Billy Bob was not authorized to sign that, so you can't really hold us to what he signed. So you want to be able to think about that up front. You've got to establish who you're working for. I would challenge every single person that's listening to this to send me a copy of a contract that the insurance company has signed for you. And I'm not really even going to have to look at my email, because we all know the insurance company don't sign contracts for you to do work. You don't work for the insurance company. You have no responsibility to the insurance company. You have no authorization from the insurance company. You have nothing from the insurance company. You may have a promise if you're on some program work, and if you're doing a lot of that, you're probably in the wrong video feed here to learn stuff, because program work is probably the worst work you can get, in my opinion. But if you're doing program work and you like that, then you might have some agreements with them, but you still don't have a contract with the insurance company to do individual jobs. You're working on a building owner's property, and that's who you work for. So you've got to know who you're working for. You're not working for the insurance company. I had a company call me one day, and they were just sort of in a big hurry. Can you get over here and help me with this building? I've got to do this building. Such and such was over here doing it, and they got kicked off the job. And now the building owner has called me to come do it, and I need help. And so we went over to help them. And the first thing I did when I walked into the lobby of the hotel and met everybody is I said, well, I need to ask a question. I said, why did so-and-so get kicked off the job? I mean, they're a large franchise, reputable organization, so to speak. But I'm like, why'd they get kicked off the job? Well, I had to ask that question because I don't want to get the guy I'm working for kicked off the job. I didn't want to make the same mistake twice. And they said, well, his problem is he was working for the insurance company. And the insurance company isn't paying him. The hotel's paying him. And I want somebody that works for me. And I never forgot that statement, because these property managers or owners or building owners don't want to be cut out of the loop. They want you to work for them. They want to be the loop, and then let them decide what goes on there. So know who you're working for. Always have your contracts reviewed by an attorney. Laws are going to vary state to state. Example, if you're from Ohio has a little known law. If you're working for a public entity, that any change order has to be in writing. You can't have an agreement by email. You can't have an agreement by text message. You can't just add it to the work as you're going. You can't have that clause in there that any work not included on this authorization will be done at exactimate pricing or reasonable and prudent pricing or customary pricing. You can't do that. The law in Ohio says that for any extra work on your contract, you have to have a signed, written change order in it. States vary. Laws in states vary. So know those laws and know your contracts, and make sure that you have good contracts for the areas you're going to be working in. Contracts, agreements, work authorizations, whatever you call it. Are you using a single line item says I'm authorized to do the work and I'm going to do it at exactimate prices? Well, lawyers and courts and arbitrators use something they call what is reasonable and customary. So they judge that by what the general public would know. So my question would be, if you went to McDonald's and you stood outside, and the first 10 people that walk out the door, and you said, do you know what exactimate prices are? And if those 10 people, if 9 out of 10 of those people say, I don't even know what exactimate is, then you're not giving your client a good contract, because they have no expectations of what exactimate pricing is. So that don't work. If you ask somebody what is a reasonable price for drying a building that walks out of McDonald's, they're not going to have a clue. So that's not going to work. You've got to give people pricing on this stuff. You can give a daily price, and then a reasonable person could take your daily price and add that up and figure out what it would cost to dry a building, and that's not going to cause you too big of an issue. But you've got to be you've got to have a good work authorization. If you give them 99 pages, those same folks walking out of McDonald's would say, "I'm not going to read all that. I couldn't understand it anyway." You'd need, as the term would go, you'd need a Philadelphia lawyer to read that to you. So you've got to have your contract in plain English and understandable. The law also says, the law and the rules of the Supreme Court also says that the author of the contract has the obligation and responsibility to make it clear and understandable. So if it's not clear and understandable and it's your contract, it's probably not going to hold up very well. So keep your contracts on the side that are reasonable and understandable, and where your neighbor can read it and understand what's going on. What have you got to have included in your contract to make it legally binding? Number one, you cannot have blanks included. If you leave a contract blank, they will carry you to the mail with it. If you leave a line on that contract blank. Well, what's that blank supposed to mean? Oh, this contract's not important because you didn't fill in the blank. So if you've got a blank on a contract you're using, either take that blank out or write something in it. Now, that something may be NA for non-applicable. It may put a number in it, but if you don't need a blank there, don't put a blank there. I've seen a ton of people get contracts signed, and beside every paragraph, they got a place for an initial, and then they don't get them initialed. Well, you know what? That means that paragraph don't count because it's not initialed. Now, if you don't have that blank there, it don't matter. But make sure that every blank is filled in. You've got to have, and this being a legal term, what is a meeting of the minds when you have a contract. I'm going to buy this product. I'm going to pay this amount for this product, and I'm going to receive this product on this day. So now everybody agrees to that. The seller produces that to the buyer. The buyer says, I agree to it. You have a meeting of the minds. That's when you have a good contract. But if the customer don't understand what you're doing and how you're doing it and when you're doing it, you don't have a meeting of the minds. And if you don't have a meeting of the minds, your contract's not very good. You're going to lose if you have to go to the ring and fight that one. As work progresses, you need to keep on your communication side. You need to keep everybody involved on what's going on and do what change orders are necessary if you have change orders during the job. And in the mitigation phase, I do very few jobs that don't have change orders. So you need to have payment terms in your contract. When do you expect to get paid? When you get paid is not a very good phrase for you to put in your contract, because what if they don't get paid? Well, that just means then you don't get paid. If you're getting paid when they get paid and they don't get paid. What if they don't get paid all their money? That leaves the line open to be subject there. Well, I got paid, but you said when I get paid, and I haven't got paid in full yet. So be careful using when you get paid from the insurance company clause, because once again, you don't work for the insurance company. How are you going to deal with that? And what if they don't get paid? What if you do the mitigation on a claim and they figured out that it's not a covered claim? It was a lack of maintenance, or it was some reason that they've got some little line in the insurance contract that this claim's not covered, or maybe it's a third party claim and the third party don't have insurance, but for whatever reason you get back to that delay, deny, defend. Now they're denying the claim, and you're stuck holding the bill for it, the money you put in, if you've got a clause in there saying that you get paid when they get paid. So be a little bit careful with that. You've got to have that the people sign the contract or an authorized agent to sign the contract. Again, the word agent, we're referring to a commercial building. being the agent. Now, they might not be, they might be the janitor, but you're going to send this up the chain of command the next day or something. I'm not saying don't start sucking water out of the floor just because the president and CEO of the corporation's not present and standing there in the water to sign your agreement. But I'm saying you don't need to just get the janitor sign it and do $100,000 job and then decide, oh well, he didn't have the authorization to sign it. So be careful of that. This damage occurred on or about what day? It's not your day to determine exactly when it happened, okay? It determined on or about this day as a result of, leave that generic. If you put a result of the water line breaking on the ice maker going to the refrigerator, you might be wrong. It might be a result of overpressurization from the water company that overpressurized the line. It caused the ice maker line to break. You don't need to get into all that. It's a result of water. So you're there to deal with water, or you're there to deal with fire, or you're there to deal with smoke. So leave that a little bit generic, unless you're hiring an engineer or forensic person to come out and analyze what the cause of the damage is. Leave that a little bit generic. So the last paragraph in this slide, it talks about you're going to follow the standards as set forth by the IICRC. Well, a normal prudent person is not going to know what the IICRC's S500 is. I've never heard of it. But the line that's not showing in this, that goes on a little below, it says a copy of which will be provided you upon request. So if somebody requests a copy of the IICRC manual, then you have indicated to them that you will supply them with that so they can have that information. The only time I've ever had anybody ask for that is after the fact. And when their insurance company decided they wouldn't pay them the bill or they wouldn't pay them the full amount, then they want to see it. And we provide it. And it is at a cost, and that cost is on our rate schedule. And so we provide it once they pay that cost. You got to have terms and conditions on the contract. What are your terms? What are your conditions? What are you going to do? You've also got to have a clause in there how to get out of the contract if somebody wants out of it. Those are a little sketchy. Can you imagine being on the operating table and the doctor slicing your chest open to do open heart surgery, and he says, oh, insurance company ain't going to pay for this. I'm just going to go get a burger at McDonald's and leave this guy laying here. Well, you really can't do that. Well, you're sort of in the same situation on mitigation once you accept that job. Once you start sucking water, you've sort of taken on that responsibility of keeping that house from getting in worse shape than it's in. And can you walk off of a job? Yes. Does that incur risk? Yes, it does. So be careful when you do that. Have provisions in your contract on how to terminate it, and make sure that you terminate it in the proper manner. I had a shelter agent one time tell me we left the house wet because the client said leave it wet. I'm tired of air movers running. I'm tired of this. I'm tired of that. It looks dry to me, so we left it wet 30 years ago. Sent the client and the insurance company both emails and said the client wants to leave it wet. You know, it's his house. We don't have a choice. We're pulling out. So 6 months later, when they found mold under the house, they called and said, well, you need to pay for this. You didn't do a good job. I said, no, we got emails. Here's the email we sent to you, the insurance company. Here's the email we sent to the client, and everybody agreed to leave it wet. And well, yeah, but we still think it's your responsibility because you're the professional, and you didn't make everybody understand the full ramifications of what that would cause. So when you're getting out of a contract, make sure that everybody's clearly educated in writing, because if you don't write something down, you never done it or you never said it. So if you're putting something down, put it in writing. So make sure that you got any breach of contract, that you've got it in writing, and that you make it really plain and really clear, and sort of kind of what you would say overdo it to some extent. When you write a contract or work authorization, you've got to make sure you do what's in the contract and work authorization. You can't put in there that you're going to return the structure to pre-damaged conditions that I typically see in a lot of contracts when you're not doing the rebuild, because you're not turning it to pre-damaged condition if you're not putting the paint back on the wall. So make sure your contract and your scope of work is complete and it says exactly what you're going to do for this terms of the contract. So early termination, I've already talked about a good bit. In all caps on the very bottom, no oral contract termination request will be valid. We need this in writing. Now, let's be honest. You're standing in the middle of somebody's building and they're saying, get your stuff out of my building right now. And I say, send it to me in writing. No, I'm not going to do that. I mean, you can't take a gun and stick it in somebody's head and say, yes, you are. But you do have that in your contract. I would, if somebody said that and you were obviously in a situation where they may be changing contractors, or they may have found out that they don't have coverage for the claim and they're not going to be able to pay you because they simply don't have the money because there's no coverage. Could be several different circumstances, but make sure you have that plain and clear, and that just because they won't write it don't mean you can't write it and email it back to them. We call that reverse emailing. So make sure you cover yourself if they're taking you off a job and further damage could occur, that you've got a good understanding of what to do in case the third party is breaching the contract. Payment terms, you always want payment terms in there. You want to include attorney fees, arbitration fees. You want to include, whatever's allowed by law, be reasonable on it. See what your state is. There's one state, and I done picked on Ohio once, but I sort of kind of think it's in Ohio, that allows 2% over prime, the prime interest rate on interest fees on a contract that's not paid on time. There's one state that allows 9%, period, end of story. There's other states that don't have a cap on it. If you put too much in there, you sort of look like a hog. My daddy always said pig got fat and hogs went to slaughter. So don't go to slaughter and don't be a hog, just be a pig. Put enough in there for yourself, but don't try to be a hog and charge 250% or some ridiculous amount like that. This particular phrase in here has 1.5%, which amounts to 18% annually. Seems to be a fairly decent rate for today's economy. But you got to have something in there to where you can make it a little painful if they're not paying the bill on time, that there's a little consequence for that. Otherwise, there's no reason for them to want to pay it on time. Contracts, agreements, work authorizations, daily rate schedule, call it what you want to. If your contract does not have pricing in it, it is not a good contract. And if they don't want to pay you the amount you charge, they will not wind up having to. You've got to have an agreement on price. On this particular slide, you've got your rate schedule. It's 2 pages, one for labor, one for equipment. If you're supplying materials, you can either have one in materials, or you can do it at cost plus 20%, cost of the material plus 20%. And it depends on which way you write your contract. But make sure you've got a rate schedule in there that dictates what you can charge, and then go by your rate schedule. And then when the consultant comes by and says, well, Billy Bob in the yellow truck or John Doe in the green truck charges me $25 for an air mover per day, and you've got on here 30, and you're like, well, I don't have a change order that says I can change my price. And so Billy, I don't have the same agreement that Billy Bob does. We'll all agree when you go to Walmart, the prices are probably cheaper than they are at most other stores. And Walmart buys their stuff cheaper, and they do that because they have different agreements with their vendors. Well, in this case, the insurance company may have an agreement with somebody on program work, but if you're not on that program, you don't have that agreement, so there's no reason in you honoring that price. Be much like buying a brand new vehicle on fleet pricing. If you're buying 30 vehicles a year, you're going to get a bigger discount than you are if you're buying one every 30 years. So, keep that in mind when you're talking about prices. You should not negotiate your price off your contract. Your price should be your price. Scope of work. What all do you include? Now, this is really simple. What you include on your scope of work is the scope of work. What are you going to do? And if you're going to do it, you write that down. And if you're not going to do it, you don't write that down. But you need to include everything you're going to do on that scope of work. Now, we talk about water more than we do fire because there are more water damages than there are fire damages. But I would challenge you to come up with a list of a scope of work for a water damage. And then take that list and look at the last 50 jobs you've done and see if they're all not almost identical. Almost. You're going to have some things outside the box. You may have to move a piano in one that you don't have to move in every one of them, which should go on your scope of work. You may have to move a pool table, which is not on your scope of work. Some of them's going to be in the kitchen, and you may have to remove the refrigerator. However, that probably falls under appliances, so that could be included in your normal scope of work. But write a scope of work for water damage and have that scope of work with all your water damage agreements. And then if there's something outside that box as you're looking at the job and checking your boxes off, then add something extra to it, but you don't have to reinvent this wheel every time you go out and do a job. And you've got to make this easier for your employees and technicians if they're doing it, that they're not going to check all those boxes. Their scope of work is going to be return the property to pre-damaged condition. And if you're not doing recon, we know you're not going to do that. Or what if that is your scope of work, but then you don't have the correct pricing in there to do that? Because they got mahogany floors instead of oak floors. So, you've got to be careful on how you write your scope. Contracts, agreements, work authorizations, change orders. The best change order is a change order in writing and agreed to by both parties. Now, email, except as far as I know, on public entity properties in Ohio, will suffice for a change order. Know your laws in your state. But most time you can send a change order to your client by email and let them know, what the change order is. And the big majority of time you're going to get away with that if that's the proper terminology, but that's going to be acceptable. If you're dealing with a large amount of money, and I'll let you determine what large is, I would call large is more than you can afford to lose money, then you may want to go to extraordinary steps to do a change order more formally and more signatures and dates and have it written up a little differently than you would if you're doing a change order to remove the baseboard in 2 rooms. If you don't get paid for that, probably still going to be able to buy the baby's shoes next week, but be a little careful with that. But if it's not in your original scope of work, it's not in your original agreement, you need to do a change order. Completion certificates are the biggest thing in the industry that we don't get done. A lot of people call them certificates of satisfaction. And this is just to say when you get through with the job that you ask the customer, are they happy? Steve Turburian's class for strategies for success, I attended 25 years ago, probably. Yeah, I'm pretty old. But anyway, when I attended it, one of the statements Steve had taught in that class was every day of your life, when you visit that job site and you're leaving out the door, is you turn around, you look the customer in the eye and say, Miss Jones, is everything going okay for you today? Is anything else I can do for you? Are you happy? And if you do that every day of your life and Miss Jones is still happy, it's going to be hard to have an unhappy client at the end of the job. You don't want to find out she's unhappy 60 days after the job when you're trying to get a check and you hadn't been out there for 60 days. So ask that question every day. But then at the end of the job, Miss Jones, I know I ask this every day, but does everything look okay? Are you happy? Is there anything else I can do for you? No. Joe's Restoration, you've done a great job. Okay, well, I'd like to get this certificate of satisfaction or completion certificate signed, just showing where we've done a good job, and I will send you a copy of this back, and I really appreciate working with you. Now, it's going to be hard for Miss Jones to come back in 60 days later when she don't pay you and say you did a bad job. So get this signed, whether it's on a house or commercial property or what it may be, but, get that signed. Is there anything else I can do for you? Lien law basics. When you are doing a commercial project, and if it is a large loss, and you hopefully remember what I described a large loss at, but I'll describe it again. If it's more money than you can afford to lose. So if you're doing a large loss and you are looking at the job, you need to know what the lien laws are for that project. None of you have taken a mortgage out on a house that they don't have a lien on your project, on your house. Nobody's ever done that. The bank's going to put a lien on your house when you get a mortgage on it. Well, if you're doing $20,000, $30,000, $50,000, you pick the number on a commercial building, then you should have a lien on that building. And a lot of times a lien just shakes the tree. It makes you get paid, even though you never had to what they call perfect the lien, which means basically to foreclose on the property. So never had to foreclose on a property, but I've had a lot of liens, and a lot of times that lien shakes the tree and it gets people up off of it to where they have to do that. Now there's deadlines to file liens that are determined by laws. Again, know the rules of the game so you can win the game, know what's going on, but know what those rules are. A lot of states is 90 days. If you're a subcontractor, a lot of states are a year if you're a contractor, the general contractor on that project. So there's different rules for each and every different state that you go into. So know what those rules are and know when to do those. There don't have to be a confrontation. Hey, Miss Jones, your insurance company hadn't paid for this yet. We really apologize, but, our policy dictates that, we're going to need to file a lien on this within the next 20, 30 days. You think you could encourage the insurance company to go ahead and get this taken care of so we don't have to go through that, and get Miss Jones on your side to try to get that done so you don't have to file the lien. If you do file a lien, make sure you don't try to be the Attorney General. Let a lawyer do it, because if you file it and you screw something up, there can be major consequences. A lot of people's mortgages, particularly on commercial, will their mortgage will be void if you file a lien on it. If you're working for the tenant of a property that has it rented, their lease may be void if you file a lien on it. Major consequences if a business has to move. And they said, well, we went ahead and paid it, but the landlord said, well, I don't care. You still have a lien filed. You violated your lease. You're moving. So don't get caught up into that. Let a lawyer file these liens. There's too many laws to look for an average contractor to handle. So this is round one of getting paid. We're going to talk about a lot of other things next month when we continue this, but I think this is probably enough for this presentation. And I won't say I killed it today, but I knocked it out. So if you've got any questions with me, if you're at the Experience show over in South Carolina, I'll be there tomorrow and be there for the week, or you can call me at any time. So with any questions that you may have, but let's make sure when we go out on these jobs that we do get paid for the work. This is Scott Tarpley with the Crest Network, and thank you guys and have a good day.